Hello art students! In this video I would like to share with you an actual piece of a lesson where I am explaining how to recreate a two-dimensional shape from scratch on a blank piece of paper. The lesson in here cannot be underestimated. What you get in this lesson is the very fundamentals of how to understand any shape you're looking at, whether it's two-dimensional or three-dimensional. We are going to be learning to measure related to other geometric shapes, see the symmetry, and hopefully it all makes sense to you, so then you can progress from this lesson to the three-dimensional objects. The reason I'm holding this book is because I wanted to share it with you. This is lesson number 4. This is what we'll be doing. This is already considering that we've done other lessons in this book, which are preceding this. And we are starting with two-dimensional shapes in the Russian academic art curriculum with children to ease them into understanding three-dimensional shapes when they have to recreate them on the two-dimensional surface. This is extremely valuable book, first published in 1958. I have a second edition published in 1961. Even though it is so beat up, it's a former library book. It went through a lot of hands. I got it in 1997 when I was graduating, and it was retired from the library, and despite its sad condition, I was super happy to get it. I knew how valuable the information was in here. Entire 7 years of curriculum, all planned out lesson by lesson, helping teachers explain to students how to approach each step-by-step lesson toward complete academic art curriculum with ease. I hope this is helpful to you. If something wasn't clear, if I can improve, definitely give me feedback in the comments so I could make better videos and make it more clear for you as well. Let's begin. This assignment is kicking up a notch from where you are. All right. Here you pretty much don't even need anything to look at, just see this picture, understand proportions, and recreate, right? Here it's not so easy, right? It's sort of geometric, stylized, but it's already too much going on, right? So I'm going to explain how you go about it, because how you go about this particular lesson is going to preset you. You get all the skills from just this one lesson to go ahead with all kinds of other things in drawing. Basically, this is your model. You can have it right in front of you, or you can have it sitting on the side. It doesn't matter. It's just right here. It's fairly easy, right? All right. So I'll take one of my slightly longer pencils. You're going to be learning measuring. The key to success in the early studies of drawing is how to accurately recreate any object. This was starting with two-dimensional. Two-dimensional is a whole lot easier than the three-dimensional, but this is a more complicated two-dimensional, and there is somewhat of a geometry involved. So you don't have to do this frame. That was just my thing. But basically from now on, you look at any object that you're going to be drawing, and the first thing goes through your mind is its main proportions. How's the height related to the width, for example, right? So here we have this is your height, right? So here's the tip of the pencil goes here, and your finger gets here to the tip at the bottom. So this is your height. You can compare it to the width. You see that it's quite a bit wider, right? But you can already obviously sense it. Sometimes it's not that easy, especially if the kids are young. Then you can go at the widest portion of the object, right? I'm not measuring here yet. It doesn't matter because this is the widest portion of what you're seeing in this object. So again, the tip goes in here, pencil, your finger goes in here, and you want it to be close enough not super precise. This is not nanotechnology or anything. We just need it close enough to grasp the main understanding of the proportions. So we have this width. We'll line it up starting at the tip. See where this comes. You make a note. You make a note that this is where you can basically draw a straight line. See what's connecting? So basically just below these tips is where this width comes to, right? So now I'm gonna move it to here as if I put a dot in there, and I'm gonna compare it to the rest of the shape. So the width fits into this height. One time full, and the second time it's not quite, right? Which means that the width is slightly wider than half and half. Great. Which means that in your mind, you go like, all right, so if I put a mark over here, and that will be this tip. That's as high as I will draw it. And I'll put a mark over here, and that will be this tip. And I want to fit the rest of this shape in here, right? I can divide this line, connect them with the line, because we have a center of symmetry. I can put this line down, I can divide it into 2 equal halves, and then my width is going to be way above this height over here. Way above where it came to half and half, right? So that would be kind of like your first starting point, right? You can then say, all right, so if I did that, I divided my first line in halves. I compared where the half and half is here. Let's say it's right there, right? So that's pretty close, right? So these 2 lines actually come here and stop right at the half and half of this height, right? So that means you can represent it here with the line, stops here, and you divide that line in 2 exact halves, you will already have the position for these 2 points. You then say, all right, so I'll look at it again, measure the width, compare it to this height, and it comes kind of just above here, right? That's going to be my width. So once you have that point for that half, you adjust it. That's your half, let's say. You add a little additional space here. You're now already starting to sense the proportion, because if your point is right here, you're not pushing it way high or too close. You're trying to duplicate this space, right? Once you got that, you got your width, you mark it evenly on both sides of your center of symmetry, and you got this proportion compared to this proportion, pretty close to what you're looking at. You see? Now, here you are going to measure everything just with your pencil, right? No rulers, but just with your pencil. So you start to get the sense of proportion. When we're drawing 3-dimensional objects, you can't exactly do the same thing very easily because they're 3-dimensional. And there's like foreshortening and things are happening. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be measuring in the air, right? What is it called? Eyesight measuring, while looking at the object. But you're going to be going through the same pattern of how to get started. So what happens is, in your brain, in your mind, once you position this 2 and you position this width, it's almost like this shape fits into this rectangle here, right? And you just did squares and circles, right? So now you have this rectangle. This rectangle is made of these 2 squares, right? And you are now starting to relate this shape to those squares, to those 2 halves and halves. And now you're going to get that width related to the first square that is slightly more than that square, right? So basically, you are now seeing how a more elaborate object, what makes it this particular object, right? What makes it it? Anybody will look at this flower here. Anybody looks at you when you recreated it, and they see it's the same thing. Why is it the same thing? Because you captured proportions correctly, right? Once you get the values done correctly, that will further make it what it is. But the main idea of this object, why it looks the way it looks, it's those proportions. Then, of course, that makes you think about the golden ratio then. Because all it is, golden ratio, is proportions. Proportions is a relationship between sizes, between shapes, right? So this shape here, it's almost like fitting into a triangle. That's another way of seeing it. So, but what it is basically is that those are more complicated shapes in your simple one, which is a rectangle or two squares together, right? And then how these additional shapes fit into those and their proportions, and how the stem, the length of the stem is proportionate to the length of the flower pot, flower shape, how this sort of leafy design is proportionate in width to the flower, and how those are connected. So again, if you connect this to here and back to here, you can see that now you can see it's sort of like a rhombus this way. You can see it more like a rhombus with the sides shaved off, which will make it what, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a hexagon, a regular hexagon, but still symmetrical, right? So you can start seeing all of those, but the initial first start is to capture the width to the height correctly. Because once you've done that and you found that center, this center is fairly easy. This center is the second one you need to find. You then can much easier and much more accurately fit all the other shapes into it, because you'll have that to compare it to. So for example, you see that if you focus on the center here, you see that majority of your flower is above it, right? Very hard to miss then. Because then you can further start dividing it. And the next step would be, let's say, this section here. If we look at that section, how is that related to here? Looks like it might be half and half. See, so that becomes easy. So you got those points, you got the width already, and then from here on, you divide it in half again, you measure it. You can even draw a straight line right across here and right across here, and then that means you fit in those shapes in there, right? You can further say, what about this? Like, what if I miss that point? Here's your center, you can measure this distance and compare it to this distance. And you see that this is much closer. If this is much closer, it becomes easier. You can see where it's half and half. You push this half, expand it this way. You keep this less. Then you now fit this in much more easily. Same dynamic goes down here. So you can see, all right, where can I divide it in perhaps halves or close to halves? How about this all the skinny, thin designs compared to this bulkier designs? Also looks like about half and half, right? So you can take this line and say, okay, I'll divide it right here and down here, which this is your center, right? So if you just lower this portion and you divide the rest in half and half, it's by now, by the time you get here, it's easier to guess this distance. Right? Because you've already gotten the center, you've already measured the width, perhaps you already laid out this part, you already gotten that. So it will be easy to say, okay, if this is my center, and I lower it a bit, I'll put my guess mark in here. I'm guessing it's here, right? And then you divide the rest in half, and you got your other proportions captured. Same thing, you can go further then. Once you got that done, you measure this portion and you see how much that goes into here. Looks like almost to here, not quite. And it starts to look like even that fits into here. Is like, seems like close to 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Slightly less. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So when it's not quite, it's not a big deal because you can start guessing already. You just put a mark, like maybe it's like this. Measure it here. Does it fit 4 or 5 times? Maybe it's like 4.5. And here it was like almost 4 with a little bit. Or I mean 5th time with a little bit. You can readjust. Once we get to it, you will see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing for the width of this, right? You can measure that. And you can say, I already did this part. How about I just measure this compared to this? Slightly less than half of this whole section. See?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one good start. You can compare it to that. You can also say, like, maybe I'll compare it to this, since this was easily found. Easily found, least likely to make a mistake. All right, so this is slightly more, right? And you compare several shapes like this, and you finally find and perfect those dots. You will never miss it. Okay, so there are several ways to check yourself, right? So what will happen is that the more you go through this process when you're drawing, the more you will see objects through those basic shapes. The more you'll look at something and then go like, oh, all right, I see, this is like definitely, the width is definitely fits in at least twice. Definitely is twice as tall as it is wide. You can even, sometimes you can even see those shapes in there. You see that this is basically a right triangle and this is a square. That the triangle sits right on the square. It can happen. Like you look at animals, especially if they're silhouette and like they're not too up close but further away, all you see is like the basic abstract shapes. A squirrel can look like a parallelogram on the side with a circle for the head. You see what I mean? Rabbits, more like a triangular shape with the head attached, like triangular shape for the body when he's sitting, let's say. And so once you start seeing it, it starts becoming easier to capture proportions because you are comparing it to the shapes you already know. Those shapes are easily capturable in correct proportions, and the rest is just fill in the details, smooth out the corners and edges. All right, do you have questions?
Not right now.
All right, go ahead and start.